You wake up in a hut with a fever so severe your teeth are chattering. Your skin burns, then chills, then burns again. Someone presses a wet cloth to your forehead, but nothing helps. This is not the flu. This is not food poisoning. This is something that has been doing exactly this to human beings for longer than agriculture, longer than writing, longer than civilization itself. We think of disease as a modern problem. We blame crowded cities, dirty water, global travel. But here is what almost no one talks about. One disease was already ancient before humans were even human. It is not the plague. It is not cancer. It is malaria. Let us go back. Way back. In 2008, scientists studying amber found something remarkable. Preserved inside a piece of fossilized tree resin from the Dominican Republic was a mosquito, trapped mid-bite, roughly 30 million years old. Inside its gut, researchers identified the fossilized remains of a malaria parasite. 30 million years. That is before the first apes existed. That is before the first monkeys existed. Malaria did not evolve alongside humanity. Humanity evolved into a world where malaria was already waiting. The parasite responsible, a single-celled organism called Plasmodium, has had tens of millions of years to perfect its method. It hijacks a mosquito as a delivery system, rides through saliva into a bloodstream, and then invades red blood cells one by one, multiplying inside them until the cells burst open. That is what causes the fever cycles. That is what has been happening to warm-blooded animals since long before the first campfire. By the time actual humans arrive on the scene, malaria is not new. It is one of the oldest relationships our species has ever had, and it is a hostile one. The evidence in ancient humans is staggering. In 2014, researchers analyzed DNA from Egyptian mummies dating back over 3,500 years and found genetic markers consistent with malaria infection. Tutankhamun himself, the boy pharaoh, showed signs in his remains suggesting he had been infected with the disease, possibly multiple times, possibly contributing to his early death. This was not a rare misfortune. This was ordinary life along the Nile. The Greeks knew it intimately. Hippocrates, writing around 400 BCE, described periodic fevers with such precision that modern doctors can identify which type of malaria he was likely describing just from his notes. He documented fevers that struck every third day and fevers that struck every fourth day, patterns that match the biological life cycle of specific Plasmodium species almost exactly. He did not know about parasites or red blood cells. He simply watched, and he recorded what he saw with startling accuracy. The Romans gave the disease one of its oldest nicknames, Roman fever, because the marshes surrounding the city were breeding grounds for the mosquitoes that carried it. For centuries, wealthy Romans left the city during certain seasons specifically to avoid it. They did not know why the marshes made people sick. They only knew that staying near them was dangerous. The actual name malaria comes from centuries later, from Italian malaria, meaning bad air. For most of human history, people believed the disease came from foul-smelling swamp vapors rising into the atmosphere. It took until 1880 for a French army doctor named Charles Louis-Alphonse Laveran to look through a microscope at a sick patient's blood and identify the actual parasite moving inside red blood cells. It took until 1897 for a British physician named Ronald Ross to prove that mosquitoes were the ones transmitting it. Nearly 2,000 years passed between Hippocrates describing the fevers and anyone understanding what was actually causing them. So why has this disease survived for tens of millions of years while so many others have vanished or been contained? The answer is that malaria did something almost no other disease managed. It changed human DNA itself. In parts of Africa, where malaria has been relentless for thousands of generations, a genetic mutation emerged that alters the shape of red blood cells, giving them a sickle-like form. This mutation makes it dramatically harder for the malaria parasite to survive inside those cells. Carrying one copy of this gene offers real protection against severe malaria. It comes at a cost. Carrying 2 copies causes sickle cell disease, a painful and dangerous blood disorder. This is natural selection making a brutal trade. A population accepts a devastating illness in some individuals in exchange for widespread protection against an even older killer. Malaria was such a dominant force in human survival that it physically reshaped the human genome. Similar genetic shields evolved independently in other malaria-prone regions, involving different blood conditions entirely. That is not something that happens with a disease that is new or minor. That is the signature of a threat that has been shaping human evolution for an extraordinarily long time. Here is the part that surprises most people. Malaria is not gone. It is not a historical curiosity locked away in ancient texts and mummy scans. According to the World Health Organization, malaria still infects roughly 250 million people every single year and still kills several hundred thousand, the overwhelming majority of them young children in sub-Saharan Africa. The disease that outlived the dinosaurs' extinction event by tens of millions of years, that infected pharaohs, that terrified Roman senators, that reshaped human blood at a genetic level, is still here, still active, still spreading through the same basic method it has used since before there were apes to bite. We often imagine disease as something civilization created, a side effect of crowding, pollution, or modern excess. Malaria tells a very different story. It reminds us that some of our oldest enemies were never invented by humans at all. They were already ancient, already patient, already perfected, long before the first human ever stood upright and looked out at the world it was about to inherit. 30 million years is difficult to comprehend. But somewhere tonight, in a small hut or a crowded home, someone will feel that same fever begin to rise, the same one that plagued a pharaoh, haunted a Roman senator, and puzzled a Greek physician who had no microscope, only patience and careful eyes. The disease has barely changed. We are the ones still catching up to it.